Welcome to another Energy Exchange here with Matt Sommer of Shipley Energy. I'm Gary Sutton, and it's great to be with you here again, Matt, as we sit high atop the baseball field getting ready for the season here at Wellspring Park. But when we talk about competition every day, competition is a good thing. We're going to see it out here a lot with baseball this season. But how is competition different with electricity competition? That's something a lot of people would like to know.
Oh, great. Yeah, so competition is important. Yeah, you mentioned baseball here. It's a fundamental part of the economy. Businesses compete for their customers' business. And what it does is it drives efficiency. It forces businesses to make sound investments, to use their resources wisely, to get the best products and services to their customers at the best possible prices.
Yeah, we talk about them driving prices. And of course, we like to get the lowest price, the best quality thing that we get out there. But at the same time, though, when we talk about pushing innovation, that's something that's really important, too, that people sometimes miss in that whole argument.
Absolutely. So with competition in energy, suppliers are always looking for ways to differentiate themselves. And one of the best ways to do that is to bring new products and services to the market. It is a commodity, which sort of by definition means they're all the same. And every company is looking for ways to enhance their offering to differentiate from competition.
Is it true that long ago, prior to deregulation, utilities were responsible for both generating and delivering electricity? So what led to this shift to deregulation, and what were the intended benefits, and have they come around to being the intended benefits now for people?
Yeah, sure. So when electricity was invented, really, and commercialized in this country, originally different utility companies controlled different territories. The idea was it really wasn't efficient to have multiple companies running wires all over various cities. So we're here in York, and MedEd is the local utility here in York, and they're the only one. And they ran the wires, they built the generation and served their customers, and that model worked very well in the early years. Eventually, it was determined that there would be benefits if the utilities did not actually operate the generation. So they still operate the network itself and maintain that system and the wiring, but the generation is now separately owned, and that is a competitive market. And what that does is it causes the operators, the owners and operators of the generation, to make sure they're as efficient as possible in their operation. It's analogous to the utilities are delivering the products much as UPS or FedEx does, that you're purchasing from, say, Amazon online, and the consumer can choose many different options, and one company delivers whatever you choose.
There's a word that some of these companies want to get back out and do some generation again. What are your thoughts about that in terms of policy? We're going to deregulation. We see what that's like. Now they want to kind of head back to where they were before. Give us a little bit of a comparison of what that looks like to you right now.
Sure. So electricity prices, by virtue of this competition, the price of electricity has been relatively stable for a very long period of time. That's the competition has caused efficiency to occur, and for the system to work really well. If you compare the state of Pennsylvania to some other states, we have favorable prices. Prices have risen recently, that is true, and that does, in a competitive market, there can be a little bit more volatility over the short term, but in the long run, there's genuine benefit. When big industrial customers and corporations are looking at different states where they want to site new facilities, they look to see what the energy market is like in that state. They look at the workforce and the skills of the workforce. They look at the tax structures in these different states. And energy is probably right up there with those other two that they're looking to, okay, what's the energy market like? What prices can I expect to pay? And should I build a factory? So we talk a lot about electricity deregulation at the individual consumer level, which is very important, but it also is an economic driver for our region as well.
So if these utility companies go back to the generation process again, after what we've seen with deregulation and the lowering of prices overall in a general sense, doesn't sound like such a good thing. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, when utilities control generation and you can read some stories in some other states of some projects that have gone really poorly. The ratepayers, who are customers of the utility based purely upon where they live, bear the risks of any bad investments that are made or poor operating. So if Shipley were to build a power plant here in New York, we'd have to make sure that it was economically viable and that we were confident that we could earn a reasonable return on that investment, and there'd be no guarantee of that return. In regulated energy markets, the utilities are guaranteed a reasonable rate of return for their investment, even if it proves to not be a good investment.
So now I've asked you the what if question. Now when I ask you the where the rubber meets the road question, are there any states that have done this, where they've deregulated and going back to starting generation again among the utilities?
I don't believe other states have rolled it back to that degree, but we have seen some states that have made competition more difficult, and they've passed laws that I think were intended to protect consumers, but have had the effect of having fewer people shop. We saw that as closely as the state of Maryland passed a variety of new regulations that make it increasingly hard for suppliers to do business there, and some suppliers have chosen to pull out of the state.
What kinds of regulatory policy changes are being discussed right now, maybe here in Pennsylvania and other places as well, to strengthen the electricity markets and make them more consumer friendly in the long run, which is what we're all looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been working on, you've probably heard, and I think we discussed it in the last pod, the idea of the price to compare. And this is the rate that the utility charges for supply if you continue to buy from them. We believe that there's some issues with how that price is determined. For one thing, there are a whole slew of costs that the utilities bear that are not baked into that price, that suppliers must put into their price. What that does is create a distortion where it's not truly an apples to apples comparison. The utilities price is effectively a little bit artificially low, and customers who choose to shop end up paying for some of the same things twice, both to their utility and to their supplier. So there's talk of legislation that would adjust that so that all the costs are properly accounted for, and you have a more efficient market that sends better price signals to customers. And we're very supportive of that effort.
Talking with Matt Sommer here of Shipley Energy. Matt, for consumers trying to navigate electricity choices for the first time, I mean, what are some resources they could use? What are some steps they could take to make sure they make the right kinds of choices, or at least to help guide them in making those choices?
Absolutely. So I think I mentioned this last time. There's a website that the Pennsylvania PUC has. Other states have similar websites that basically is a tool to allow you to compare prices across a variety of suppliers. That can be a really good jumping off point. I would also encourage people to then, if they have maybe a short list of people that look like they have attractive offers, to do a little research. Shipley is a local company with a strong reputation. And I think if you check us out, you'd see that we do some pretty good things in the communities we serve. But that's probably how I would suggest you start. Is there are a lot of suppliers out there, and that's a really good thing. Find a short list, see what they're all about, and see who matches up best with what you're looking for.
Again, I return back to this baseball stadium we're sitting in right now here at Wellspan Park, where competition always brings a lot of enjoyment and a lot more people out as opposed to no competition. Final word today on competitive energy prices and making sure that we kind of stay in a situation where we're deregulated.
Yeah, it's kept prices very reasonable. Unfortunately, we've lived in an era where there's been a lot of inflation in everything that we're buying. But if you look over the long term, since deregulation first came to Pennsylvania, I think it's pretty hard to argue that it wasn't a good thing.
Matt, it's been fun having another energy exchange with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. And where can people find you again at Shipley?
Our website's probably the best spot, shipleyenergy.com.
Either that or knock on Matt's door someday. He'll love that too. Another energy exchange with Matt Sommer for Shipley Energy. I'm Gary Sutton.